Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. And as usual, I'll remind you, join the mailing list. You can join the mailing list on the sidebar at Canada Report here and on the sidebar at Canada Poly here. Don't forget, you can check out the merch and shop and donate where you can buy memberships that mirror the Locals membership. There are membership perks you can get, so there's exclusive content, and I'll be putting up some more exclusive content. This last week was a little bit sparse because I was on vacation, but I'll be working on that this week, so you should check that out. Also, Locals is really good if you want a notification of me posting new daily shows. It gives you an indicator when I've posted, or gives you an app indicator on your phone when I've posted. So if you want that, check that out. Locals is good for that. And don't forget to check out the forums on canadapoly.com. They're quite robust. And how many do I have? 480. I think that I have more than that. I'm sure that I think I'm over 500. Hold on. I'm not sure. Hold on. Let's see. 487. So not quite 500 yet. We'll get there soon. And okay, let's get into the news. Protest. Jason Kenney is talking about after 16 months. Actually, it's Randy Hillier who's posting this. After 16 months of fear-mongering, we have our first premier actually state the obvious. Premier Kenney believes media should stop promoting fear when it comes to COVID-19. I agree. I think that the media fear-mongering and inflating people's already kind of inflated anxiety is not responsible. It's not a good use of our media dollars, our media landscape. And I dislike getting into the car. Every other ad is about COVID because the businesses are struggling, right? They don't have a lot of ad money, or if they do, maybe they're not advertising on local because they're going in a different direction because they're being crushed locally because they can't open. They have to pivot to the internet, right? So that's a very interesting consequence of this whole thing. Here's a story I found interesting. It mirrors today. I think it's an old one, but I could be wrong. But I think this is an old excerpt from World War II era. I'm going to read it because I think it's interesting, and it leads into the next story. People are protesting around the world, but not so much in Canada. Not yet. We're not protesting yet. That's interesting to me. I think that people feel the boot heel on them, and it is, like I've said, very difficult in Canada to protest, especially when teachers' unions and government make up. I think it's something like 60% of the employment in Ontario is somehow connected to the government like that. And that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot. Maybe you're married to somebody. Maybe you've got a brother who's a teacher, a sister who's a teacher, a brother who's a principal, a sister who's a teacher, something like that. Who knows? And you're kind of like, well, they're not bad people, but it's not about that. They're being usurped and used by the system, right? I talked before about kind of being paid off. Like the teachers, their job isn't what they thought it was. Teaching online is fundamentally different than teaching offline, but you don't have to wear a mask, so it's better. You're being told you're doing your job. You're being paid like you're doing your job, but you know there's something wrong with it. And the kids know there's something wrong with it. Everybody's kind of not taking it as seriously as school, right? And school's been kind of usurped too, and teachers know that. But again, paid off. And it's painful to rock the boat. If you say, hey, this critical race theory is no good, they're going to fire you. I'm sorry, they're going to fire you. They're just going to fire you. That's it. And until everybody stands up and says this critical race theory is no good, they're just going to fire you. Why? Because they've got lots of teachers, and they don't care if they're good teachers or bad teachers, so long as they toe the party line. That's it. They don't care. The unions don't care. The principals don't care. The principals care to a certain degree. They don't want to deal with parents who don't like the teachers. But if everybody's being shamed into accepting critical race theory, which is exactly what's happening, I'm going to give you an example of what's happening. Like that, being shamed into not mentioning something that's obviously bullshit. And I put myself out there, but hey man, that's me. That's what I do. Okay, let's talk about this first. This is from World War II. Here we go. Quote, to live in this process is to absolutely not be able to notice it. Please try to believe me. Unless one has a much greater degree of political awareness, acuity than most of us had ever had occasion to develop. Each step was so small, so inconsequential, so well explained, or on occasion regretted, that unless one were detached from the whole process from the beginning, unless one understood what the whole thing was in principle, what all these little measures that no patriotic German could resent must someday lead to, no one more saw it developing from day to day than a farmer in his field sees the corn growing. One day, it's over his head, right? All of a sudden, oh my goodness, there it is, pop, right? Your little men, your Nazi friends were not against National Socialism in principle. Men like me who are the greater offenders, not because we knew better, that would be too much to say, but because we sensed better. Pastor, I can't say, Niemöller, sorry if I got that wrong, I probably got it wrong, spoke for the thousands and thousands of men like me when he spoke too modestly of himself and said that when the Nazis attacked the communists, he was a little uneasy, but after all, he was not a communist, and so he did nothing. And then when they attacked the socialists, he was a little uneasier, but still he was not a socialist and he did nothing. And then the schools, and then the press, and the Jews, and so on, and he was always uneasier, but still he did nothing. And then they attacked the church, and he was a churchman, and he did something, but by then it was too late, right? Where are we on that scale right now, right? What little slides have we accepted? What little agreements and hold on, let me think of the word. Little betrayals of our own ideals, right? We ignore something, we carry on, we don't say, hey, that's not okay, right? And instead we put our head down and ignore it and hope whatever we saw that was outside of our realm of like, that's okay, goes away or stops. But it's not going to stop, because if you don't stand up and say something, not you personally, but you, the society, right? If the society doesn't say this is not okay, like this is something we should fix, then it's going to continue. Look at the burned churches, okay? Here's an example of, you could carry on and walk on by and say, right, not something I should comment on or whatever. Maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should. But I think that this is something within the context of like the NASCAR nooses, the Jussie Smollett race hoax, the idea that Canadians are somehow unbelievably racist and terrible, terrible, awful people. I resent that. I'm a first generation Canadian. My family immigrated here from two different places. My parents met in Toronto, right? Both of them immigrants from different places. So it's not like they both immigrated here from one place. It was two different places. They met in Toronto and they're like, hey, you want to make a go of this? Cool. So I resent the idea that all of Canada is racist and they've been racist, and all of the legal frameworks are hidden racism. The idea of a hidden racism, the idea that like you're racist and you don't know it, you're a bigot and you don't know it, you're just living life and you're so sheltered or so stupid that you don't see that you're bigoted by living life by the rules that were set out by the society before you. And I just reject all of that. I think that that's stupid, and I think that what's being done there is exactly what was being done here in the 1930s and the 1940s, right? And first they came for, and then, right, and I was not this person or I was not that group, so I didn't say anything. But now they're coming for everybody, and they're using everybody. They're coming for anti-vaxxers right now. That's who they're coming for. And if you're an anti-vaxxer, well, you're the bad guy, right? So that's what they're coming for. And they're driving a wedge in any way they can, including using the race wedge. I've grown up in Guelph my entire life. I read this story and I said, bullshit, absolute bullshit. So here's the story. You make up your mind. I went round and round with Chidi, the guy who posted this, and maybe you can read it. I can't access it on my on the Canada Poly Twitter, but on my Mark Peralibus Twitter I can see it. So that's weird. So maybe look at my Twitter feed to see the conversations had with people about my stance on this. But this is what this person put out, and then Cam Guthrie responded, which I think is strange. But to me, this didn't happen. People don't do this. People don't behave this way. Women don't behave this way generally. Like, women aren't aggressive in that way, right? So here's the story. Say no to racism. This morning, July 24th, 2021, my kids and I were enjoying this beautiful landscape of our wonderful city of Guelph when a middle-aged white woman rolled down her car window and screamed, N-word. My kids were shocked to hear such a racial slur from a woman that looks like their mother. I've put in more volunteer hours in government and non-governmental organizations in our community for a period of 10 years than anybody I know. I don't think that my kids and I deserve that kind of treatment. Nobody does. This kind of act is normally referred to as an isolated incident. No, it's not. It's racism. This is what equity-seeking groups and community organizers like myself are fighting on a daily basis to help dismantle these kinds of social ill and ideologies in our community. This so-called isolated incident makes me stronger and want to do more for our community. Together we can do better for the interests of all. Now, I did a 7-part series on the Upper Grand District School Board saying that any system built by a white person is inherently racist because it was built by a white person. I took umbrage with that, because telling any child that because their skin color is a certain way, anything they build, any system they create, and a system is like a computer system, a system on like for responding to emails or anything. Like any system that a white person creates is inherently racist, according to the Upper Grand District School Board. I have a problem with that. So we're going to ignore that kind of racism being taught to kids about white people at the Upper Grand District School Board. But this story is going to get play from the mayor. The mayor says, "Love ya, that's what I'd roll down with my window to say to you and your kids. Thanks for calling it out. Stand proud and strong for who you are as a leader and a great dad, husband, and friend to many." And okay, terrible if it happened. Terrible if it happened. But it doesn't something like that doesn't happen in Guelph. What's the context here? In a beautiful landscape of our wonderful city of Guelph, when a middle-aged white woman rolled down, like you can almost feel the storm clouds roll up. It seems like somebody's writing a fairy tale or something, right? Like it just seems like bullshit. Bullshit. I don't think that happened. I've grown up in Guelph, and if that's happening, that's new. That's not the Guelph that I know. Thank you very much. And so it was a very interesting response. A very interesting response. And in a country that has freedom of expression, you are allowed to express your doubt about a public story that somebody puts on Twitter. If somebody said, "You know what? I saw these pigs and I was just walking down the street and they up and flew out of this enclosure here and into my truck here. I couldn't believe it. They grew wings and they flew." Would you believe that? Would you be like, isn't that something? You want to help me put my pigs back? Right? Like, I feel like you might be telling a story. So he asked me what my expertise was in coming to a conclusion. I thought it was funny. I was like, really? So this is the kind of stuff. Do you walk by and not say anything? Do you see a story like that and say, okay, yeah, that totally happened. We're so terrible. I guess that's a lesson for us all. Thanks, Justin Trudeau, right? Is this something that you just carry on and walk on by? Like, maybe I'm wrong to pick a fight like this. Maybe this is the worst idea in the world, and like I should just let this carry on and let him put this crap out there. But I don't think so. I don't think, like, is Canada this racist that now women are rolling up on little families and saying like mean words? And if so, is this the right venue to address that problem? Like, what a strange thing the whole thing is strange. And then he was like, he was telling me how angry I was making him. And I was like, listen, man, race hoaxes are a big deal. And they happen a lot. Like, anyway, it's ridiculous. He told me I was unprofessional and I should get fired from my job. I don't think I'm going to fire me. I think that I'm going to keep me around for right now. So, sorry, everyone. Well. But moving on. Okay, let's look at the protests around the world. I think things like that are happening a lot. And they reinforce this idea that Canada is terrible and awful. And we're not. We're just not. We're not. Stop comparing people to this fictional idealization of a utopia that doesn't exist. Look at the rest of the world in comparison to that. And stop pretending that if you don't believe somebody's ridiculous story, you're somehow injuring them or you're bullying them. Saying, listen, dude, this pig flying story here that you've spun me about these pigs moving from here to there, it doesn't sound very believable. That's not attacking anybody. That's saying what you're saying is nonsense. I don't think that that's an attack. Is that an attack? Are you attacking somebody? Maybe. I guess. I don't know. Saying what you're saying is not true. See, the thing is, though, it could be a misunderstanding. Maybe she was looking for directions and she decided, and then sat nav kicked in and whatever. Like, I'm not saying that somebody didn't roll up and yell something. I'm saying that maybe there's more to the story. Maybe there's context here. It's not very likely in Guelph that a white woman will roll up to people and be like, wah, 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 and then drive away. Is this happening now? Like, is this a thing? I mean, I guess it's not very likely that vehicular people being run over by cars would increase by as much as it's increased either, right? But that's happening too. So, but wouldn't that be put on demographics? Wouldn't that be put on like this change has been tracked since this period of time? I don't know. This story stinks to the high heaven to me. Okay, let's get into the protests and the rest of the news. Here's Toronto. Here's Toronto yesterday for Freedom March. Lots of people in Toronto. People are not happy with what's happening. Who can blame them? Who can blame them?
Guys, you got what you wanted, but you're not doing for the community. And I'm gonna keep telling you until you slow down.
So I don't know why I don't know why he's saying you're not doing it for the community. Here's Paris. Oh, okay, Paris, France. Hold on. This struck me. It tickled me a little bit within the context of our fake news media. Global News says, most French adults are fully vaccinated and polls indicate the majority of the population support the new measures. Their headline is, France's far right takes to the streets in protest of COVID-19 vaccine rules. They're not using passport. Vaccine rules. They don't want to make the vaccine passport like terrible in the viewer's eyes, right? Here's CTV News. It's not just global news. That was global. This is CTV. Far right and other activists march against French virus rules. You can't use virus passport, vaccine passport. Virus rules is what they're protesting against. They want freedom, liberty. I'm learning French. I'm still learning. They also, I said yesterday, like, do you think they had this in storage? This is a guillotine. Chop your head off, right? This is guillotine. And I thought, man, like, do they have somebody whose job it is to keep the guillotines sharp and like in the basement of the government offices? Like, everybody's got to walk by the guillotine, whatever, however you call it. Sorry. Just to remind everyone that, don't mess with the citizenry, because every so often, and they're sharp, right? Is that stain? Is that a blood stain on the blade there? I don't know. So they've rolled that out. That's fun. Interesting. That sends a message without needing words, right? Like, that's an interesting thing. Apparently, this is Paris here. This is the police are losing control. The post-millennial tensions continue to rise in Paris. Police line is struggling to hold and is slowly being pushed back by the crowds. One of the things I heard as well is that Macron's like the Secret Service, the French version of the Secret Service, has resigned because they don't want to protect Macron, and so they've hired out private security, and that revelation was made either this morning or yesterday morning. So like yesterday morning after the show, or this morning before. I can't remember when. I thought I had the link, but I don't. I might not. I might. But anyway, that his Secret Service said, "No way, man. We're not protecting him." Massive rally is underway in Paris. The crowd is chanting for Macron's resignation. The leader of the French's Patriot Party, Philippot, estimates the crowd is over 100,000 strong. Yeah, here it is. Here's the leader. I thought it was Le Pen. I thought Le Pen was the, but I don't pay attention to French politics. Maybe she's out of it. I thought Le Pen was the heir apparent if Macron were to lose. Here's Ireland. Ireland is going off as well. So we've got Paris. We've got Dublin. This is Dublin protest. Passionate speech was well received by the massive crowd at Dublin. Here we'll watch some of this.
It's quite clear to every single person here that COVID has been used as a Trojan horse to introduce global totalitarian tyranny. I want to talk about power here today. Not that power, because they're puppets. I want to talk about corporate power, real power in society. We are living in a corporatocracy in which unelected, unaccountable, unpredictable amount of corporate power rules our lives by excessive decree. The academic establishment likes to describe this coalescence between the state and private institutions as public-private partnerships, but it's nothing more than technocratic fascism.
I like him. He's good. He's a good speaker. So there's a lot of people. London was protesting as well. Here's Trafalgar Square, London, and this is some dude, kind of looks like Jon Stewart. A great crowd has assembled at Trafalgar for London protests, part of the worldwide global rallies. We need to get rid of vaccine passports and have no more lockdowns, free speech, and end Coronavirus Act. There's a lot of people who are upset about this. There are a lot of people who want this done. Zuby says, talking about the vaccine, we're going to get the vaccine, talking about vaccine right now too. They're simultaneously saying that people who take the Rona jabs can still spread the virus, while claiming that those who don't take it are putting those who do at risk. They're not even attempting to be coherent. It's pure divide and conquer, turning neighbor against neighbor. To anyone with a semblance of rational thinking and decency still intact, I urge you not to fall for this. They're the same tactics used by the worst people to ever exist in history, and they lead to darkness. Your neighbors are not an existential threat to you. Good job, Zuby. I agree. Australia is rounding up healthy people who visited a winery for mandatory hotel quarantine. Cypriots need a negative test to visit a supermarket, so Greeks. France is threatening cafe owners who refuse to enforce vaccine passports with a year in jail. And you thought 2020 was bad. It's getting worse. Global News says Canada's vaccine uptake and rate of vaccination is still among the highest in the world. And here is here are the stats. The reason that I highlighted this tweet was the stats from last year compared to the stats from this year. Last year, the virus was novel. We had no idea what it was. We had we were more open than we are now. No masks, not nationwide anyway. In Guelph, there were masks as of July 23rd, but most places did not have mask mandates at that point in time. And no, I don't know about distancing. We may have had distancing rules, but July 23rd, 2021, 80% of people vaccinated. There were 192 COVID-19 cases and 1 death. July 23rd, 2020, with 0% vaccinated, there were 103 COVID-19 cases and 0 deaths. And weren't the vaccines supposed to reduce COVID cases and deaths? How do they claim that the vaccine gives you a less severe version of the virus? Unless you have like identical copies of me and we both get exposed to the virus and one's been vaccinated and the other has not, provided they survive the vaccination, this fictional other person that gets vaccinated as the other me, which if they truly were another me, not a chance, buddy. But I mean, no coerced vaccine. After the safety tests are done, then maybe we'll talk after I look at the data and have a couple people confirm it for me. Because I just don't believe these people. But how can you say, right, if you don't have a test of 2 identical people that, yeah, it reduces the symptoms because of the number of antibodies that the vaccine induces in a person? I feel like that's like teaching to the test, right? Like if you teach to the test, like if all you're measuring for is this antibodies, well, then you make the vaccine do antibodies and the rest, right? Like it's kind of like, well, if you get to define what the product that you're selling is, right? Like here's a pen, it writes for 10 seconds. It'll cost you $100, right? If people are willing to pay for it, like fine, but like a regular pen writes for a lot more than 10 seconds, right? So, but if you get away with a pen that is a shitty pen, it doesn't work at all, it's probably cheap, right? You don't have to put as much ink in it, right? Although that's probably the least expensive part of a pen, but regardless. These vaccines don't seem to work, is what I'm trying to say. And what the data is trying to say, right? Like the vaccines did not lead to less people in the hospital or less dead. So, I don't know, right? In fact, there's 1 more death with the vaccine than without. So, I don't get it. Here's Justin Trudeau blaming the anti-vaxxers.
To everyone out there who is looking at our rising vaccination rates and saying, oh, it's great that everybody else is getting vaccinated, that means I won't have to. Think again. We're going to continue to live with COVID-19 as a world over the coming years until we eradicate this. And that means there will continue to be cases here and there, including in Canada, in the coming months. And those cases will be primarily amongst people who didn't get vaccinated or didn't get their 2nd dose of vaccination.
How does he know this?
Everyone out there.
How does he know this? How could he possibly know this? The fact is Justin Trudeau can't know this. And here is an Australian doctor talking about how all of the people who are experiencing symptoms and problems right now are vaccinated. All of them. They deleted the original one of these videos. And I found this one. So, I mean, that's interesting too. Just the fact that they deleted it is kind of scary. This is from Australia. New COVID-19 update. Here we go. It's a minute.
141 people are in hospital with COVID at present, and 43 are in intensive care, 18 of whom require ventilation. So this is a very serious disease. Of those 141, 60 are under the age of 55 and 28 under the age of 35. And of the 43 people in intensive care, 1 is in their teens, 7 are in their 20s, 3 are in their 30s, 14 are in their 50s, and 12 are in their 60s, and 6 are in their 70s. So this is affecting people of all ages with very serious disease. All but 1 are vaccinated. 1 person has just received 1 dose of vaccine.
All but 1 are vaccinated. All but 1 are vaccinated? Hold on a second. All but 1 are vaccinated? Are you sure about that? All but 1 are vaccinated? How well does this vaccine work? Severe disease for people in their 20s? This is not what we agreed to. We were told that this was going to help, and all that it's done is hurt, right? Here is Illinois, 159 dead, 593 hospitalized in Illinois' breakthrough COVID-19 cases. Breakthrough cases are cases in fully vaccinated. More than 150 people have died and nearly 600 have been hospitalized in Illinois due to COVID-19 and breakthrough cases after they were fully vaccinated, according to the state health officials. So Justin Trudeau is trying to spin a story of these vaccine hesitant people being a danger to people, but that's not coherent. That's not true. And what's actually happening is people are getting more ill from being vaccinated. Here's a question. Michael says, what have the vaccinated got to fear about the unvaccinated? In what way exactly does an unvaccinated person pose a danger to a vaccinated person? That's a great question. If you're vaccinated and you've got as much protection as you possibly could have, how could an unvaccinated person pose a threat to you, right? If you get the disease, well, you're going to have a minimized version of it according to if you believe that the vax works. So, I mean, right? Here is Madeline, and she says, this is disturbing. Nova Scotia reported 22 cases of myocarditis in males 20 to 30 years old after their second dose, out of a total of 20,275. That's 0.01, or 1 in 1,000. Check it yourself. Do the math. Sources linked below. She's right. I've had a couple of people double check. And yeah, yep. That's scary. Okay? Scary. Why is Justin Trudeau pushing for this? The media is also pushing for this. That girl says, this is not okay. New mapping reveals pockets of vaccine hesitancy in Kitchener and Cambridge and Elmira, right? This is the record. And so here's, I don't know if you can see the map. There we go. So the green indicates like how good, and Elmira is all yellow, right? Most need. So door to door, like how long do you think before they start going door to door based on this? But is anybody going to talk about this? Is anybody going to talk about the rate of myocarditis in adults, right? Young adults who've got lots of years left? Wild. FDA is stopping emergency authorized PCR tests, not approved in Canada either. Apparently, they're saying that it's not accurate enough to pick up the disease, and they want to roll it out, or they want to finish it by the end of 2021, and then in 2022 they want to have an assay, which is just like it'll look for COVID and flu and like a bunch of different ones. I don't think that this is, people were sending it to me saying like this invalidates the use of the PCR test. I'm not sure that that's the case here. I thought they were just like modernizing it. I could be wrong, and it could be invalidating the PCR test. And I did see that it was not fit for purpose. There was news saying it was not fit for purpose. But if it was not fit for purpose, you'd think that it would be invalidated and all of the stuff that has happened because of it would be rolled back. But if it's fit for purpose, or if it's not fit for purpose and they're replacing it with this other thing that's basically the same thing that now has flu and or COVID, like I think they're just playing games. I think it's just more games, right? And I think it's purposely confusing. Because even when, like, it's the same thing as the emergency orders being rescinded, right? People sent me stuff about that all the time when it happened, and like they were right, except that the way that things work at the government level is they were right that the emergency order was done, but they weren't right that the emergency powers and stuff were rescinded. That wasn't happening, and that's what I kind of think is happening here. And I think it's purposely confusing, and I don't like it, but it just is. If I find out that it's not fit for purpose, if I find out that PCR tests are not good and they're being removed from use and like something big is going to happen, I'll tell you. Trust me. I promise. It'll be big news. Okay, Dr. Simon says, this is an interesting thread. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I think it's an interesting thread. And if you're interested in the difference between science and pseudoscience, you should have a read through. Dr. Simon says, in his book, State of Fear, Michael Crichton of Jurassic Park fame, wrote a remarkable appendix that clarifies why politicized science or pseudoscience is dangerous. His explanations are more topical than ever and can be applied one-to-one to the current global pandemic situation. Here's a repost of my mind-blowing thread. And the mind-blowing thread, her mind-blowing thread, talks about how there was a scientific theory that was basically adopted by everybody, and the theory was eugenics, right? Like the thought that we could create a super race, and this was kind of thought as a foregone conclusion. Like, yes, you could, like breeding dogs, but I don't know that that's a one-to-one comparison, but I think that comparison is actually used in this thread. So it's an interesting thread. You should read through it. I think that the thread concludes, in hindsight, eugenics or trying to build a super race was not ethical or right or anything to that effect. But read the thread, and it's a very interesting idea comparing science versus pseudoscience, and I think that it's topical and in line with what we're living through. It's a very interesting situation to have the press determine history, right? Whose names of which street should be renamed, right? Like, oh, this is a really big problem. The Dundas naming of Dundas is a big problem, and the ignoring, right? Like the press makes the public look in a certain direction, and by making them look at one place, they're distracting the public from what's actually important. Here's homes being built by the government with our tax dollars, supposed to be affordable, but only some of them will be affordable, right? Can we say crony capitalism? Federal government provides $120 million for 302 affordable homes in Brampton. Only 72 of them fall in that category. The remaining 230 will enjoy full market rent on the backs of taxpayers. So it was built with taxpayer money funding, and they get to sell to regular full market, anybody who wants to live there, and 72 will be affordable, not low income, affordable. When did affordable become, like, oh, we're making these affordable homes, not like those unaffordable homes that everybody else has to, deal with. Like, the terminology is just a little wacky. Here's Senator Denise Batters responding to, here's BlackRock's reporters first. Documents, Liberal appointed Senator Marwa was paid as a legislator, consultant to Finance Canada, and director of 2 corporations all at the same time. Shocking, says BlackRock's reporter. Senator Batters says, also, at the same time as all of that money and all of those positions, this Trudeau-appointed independent senator has been the chair of the Senate's Internal Economy Committee, which basically runs the Senate. This is life in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's fake independent Senate. Yeah, well, I mean, the conflict of interests that happen regularly in our government would shock you. They'd make you blush, like somebody said a word you're very uncomfortable with. The Post-Millennial says, a $500 million bailout to mainstream media and other newspapers did not create jobs as promised. Are you shocked? I mean, holy smoke. They didn't create jobs with their $500 million bailout to the newspapers? I mean, you've got to be kidding. It was an ironclad plan. It was genius. It was destined to create jobs. No? Right. Because any businessman knows that investing $500 million in newspapers in 2021, probably stupid because you've got the internet, right? Anyway, very, very interesting stuff. I mean, they were supposed to create jobs. Wouldn't $500 million in like direct, like job and like retraining and all that, like learn to code? No? Okay. All right. Moving on. Government ineptness. This ad is kind of an election ad. We'll get to the election in a minute with talking about PPC and the CPC. But this struck me as interesting. Pierre Poilievre put this very, very slick ad together. He says, make more, cost less, paychecks, not debt. So this is testing a slogan. I think it's a good slogan. It's got 4.3 thousand likes, which is a lot for a Canadian politician. The thing that struck me as interesting about this ad right away, I thought, where the heck is the Conservative Party branding? Is he trying to distance himself from the Conservative Party branding? I don't know. It's nowhere on the ad. Here, I'll play it for you. I'll get out of the way.
Look at those
If I've missed it, let me know. But here it is.
prices for homes, gas, or food. No wonder we're spending more and making less. We had to spend during the pandemic, but Trudeau's plan to borrow forever means inflation and bankruptcy. Instead, let's become the best place for businesses to build, hire, and make stuff. Here in Canada, make more, cost less. Paychecks, not debt. Look at those prices for homes, gas.
Sorry. So interesting, right? Like no CPC ad branding. No, it says the Conservative, paid for by the Conservative commissioner, finance guy, but he's running under Conservative banner, so that's no surprise. But there's no Conservative branding. It's interesting. I don't know, strikes me as interesting. There's something there. Something about that strikes me as odd, but everybody's in election mode. And here, Marissa says, in its estimate, the PBO says the government is projected to take on an additional $2.7 trillion in debt before balancing the budget in 2070. Interest charges will cost Canadians approximately $3.8 trillion by 2070. Oh, $3.8 trillion. Yay. And Gary says, we're all dreaming if we think that we're immune from suffering through another great economic depression. It's inescapable now. The F only helps speed things along. So, or this F, like this Trudeau is only speeding things along to bring this financial crisis about. Maybe. I'm not an economist guy. It seems to me that we have a lot of debt, and servicing that debt is expensive. And if the interest rates go up, servicing the debt becomes more expensive. And that doesn't seem like a good mathematical equation to base like future borrowing and like repayment of the debt at, right? Like, but I'm not a finance guy, so but all of that kind of stack all that up, and you go, like, it used to be that Ontario had a big debt of $300 billion. So that was a big debt for Ontario. But it was balanced out by the fact that the federal government had like next to no debt, $20 billion. So the federal government had no debt. You figure if Ontario gets in real trouble, you can be rescued by the feds. Ish. They wouldn't. But, you know, you kind of trick yourself into thinking that. And the services, well, the cost of servicing the debt is built into the budget. And so, I mean, it's not great, but you can live in Ontario, kind of. But after all this, like, you want to get to a place where services can be afforded by the state. And at this point in time, like, the debt is going to eat up all of our extra money. Maybe? I'm not a finance guy. But at this point in time, it just seems like the services are going to suffer, or other cuts are going to have to come in from service, you know, like from employment or something to that effect. Who knows? But money's going to have to come from somewhere at some point. Or maybe we'll just keep printing it? I don't know. It seems like viable. I mean, it seems like Justin Trudeau came in and said, okay, what are other options? What happens if we just keep printing money? And then every time there's a crisis, he just comes back and says, what happens if we just keep printing money? No, but what happens if we just keep printing money? Hold on. What happens if we just keep printing money? Terrible. It would be terrible, right? Oh, and I just feel like we've got a one-trick pony. It's diversity is our strength, and let's just keep printing money. Can we just print money? Why don't we drone him, right? Like Hillary, right? When she was talking about Julian Assange after she was talking about killing Gaddafi. I think that the casualness with which Hillary Clinton talked about killing people was interesting. Anyway, okay, let's get back to the Canadian news. Randy Hillier says, David Mulrooney, we're in a state of utter collapse, hyperdebt, inflation, supply chain disruptions, shortage of commodities and finished goods, loss of freedoms, and we've embraced totalitarian measures while the populace and politicians are seized and paralyzed over a cold virus. David Mulrooney says China is emboldened because it believes the West, Canada included, isn't just in retreat, it's collapsing on itself. This isn't abstract Marxist theory. It comes from reading our papers, listening to our artists, athletes, academics, politicians, and especially our politicians. Yeah. Anybody looking at this, and anybody who knows the board that we're looking at with regards to the West, Canada specifically, but the West, it feels like the economy is being held under in a bathtub until it stops struggling. That's what it seems like they're doing to Canada, right? We've got to build back better, but first we've got to get this to stop struggling. And once we get this to stop struggling, it'll just go much easier, right? Calgary, Western Standard, Calgary firefighter under investigation for actions at Bernier rally. So apparently you're not allowed to flash a PPC shirt as a fire person in Calgary. And they're saying that this is the standard, but I'm sure if this was a Liberal fire person, Justin Trudeau himself would have commented on it, right? But a Calgary firefighter is under investigation by city officials after the Western Standard published a video of him cheering People's Party of Canada leader Maxime Bernier from his fire truck. All city employees are expected to adhere to the City of Calgary's Code of Conduct. I'm sure Nenshi had something to do with this, right? Oh my goodness. He's like, what's that Star Wars enemy? Not Jabba the Hutt, the other one. Boss Nest? No, that's not it. I think I saw a meme of Nenshi as like a bad Star Wars guy, and I can't remember the guy's name, and I'm not going to look for the meme now because I'm going to get all the names wrong, so forget it. Aaron O'Toole talking about elections. I think it's interesting, though. Double standard, PPC, that's a problem if it was Liberal or even well, if it was conservative, they'd probably investigate too. Anyway, NDP, dicey. Aaron O'Toole says, if you don't support free speech, you have 4 parties to choose from. If you do, you only have one, Canada's Conservatives. This is a recycling of his tweet. Like, I tweet a lot. I probably tweet more than I should tweet. I tweet a lot, and they're always, like, it's very rare that I'll repeat a tweet. I'll repeat a tweet when I'm putting out a new video or something like that. Like, there's an automatic tweet that sends when I send my my stream live. And that just is what it is. But, like, this is like, somebody in the communications department said, this is an approved tweet. You should send this maybe once or twice a week, or like once or twice a month type deal to see the response. And I mean, initially it was like 500. So this is yesterday. So when I saw it, it had 500. So it's got a good response. But I've seen this exact tweet again. Like this is the second time I've seen this tweet in as many weeks. Saw it at the beginning of July, I'm sure of it. So it's weird to see the messaging recycled like that. It's not very imaginative. And there's a lot going on in Canadian politics. Like there's enough going on that I have an hour-long show. Like that's insane. Like when I started, 15 minutes, right? And just because I wanted to keep it really interesting and short, but it's not like there's not a lot going on in Canadian politics that have, like, there's a rich grouping of things to talk about that you don't even have to dip into, like iffy news even, right? Like, and it's wild. It's wild that they're like, oh yeah, talk about this. Immigration, this is in the UK. Quote, our country cannot house anyone anymore. Ian Dale clashes with this caller who claims the UK must get a grip and stop migrants crossing the channel as they may be carrying Ebola, and our system is already at a breaking point. Do you agree with her? So they're talking in the UK about immigration policies again. So all of those problems that were inherent before COVID are still problems. They're still impacting our economy. Just one example for Canada, the immigrants coming in put pressure on the entry-level home market, and so the entry-level home market experiences an increase in demand, and so when the increase in demand goes up and the supply goes down, the price goes up, right? And so the price is being driven up by bad policies at the federal and provincial level. Policies the feds are introducing that the province isn't ready for and we don't have the money for, but it doesn't matter because they're just printing money anyway, right? See the earlier skit about printing money. So everyone in the West is dealing with this, except for Japan, which is interesting. Their housing market's not going crazy. I know why that is. Do you? But everyone in the West is experiencing this, and nobody is interested in finding out or asking about why Japan is not experiencing the same thing and addressing the main root cause. They're interested in building houses that their buddies get the contract for a lot of money, and then they get to sell the houses to full rent people to offset the cost of the lower rent people, right? Like it's a very convoluted system, and I think that's on purpose, right? But nobody at all wants to address the root cause. They just want to build houses to house more people to keep the party going. Because in a Ponzi scheme, as soon as you run out of people, game's over, right? As soon as you run out of expansion, it all collapses, right? So why do you think the immigration is the main policy? It takes 18 years to build a voting new citizen within the country, right? And that person needs care. But you can import a new voting citizen and they vote and work and pay taxes right away, right? That's why immigration is used, because it's simple. You don't have to actually pay for the development of the citizen. You just get them and all their production, right? It's a very non-human way of looking at the world and like people as widgets, right? Like we're a tick on a counter, not Mark, right? Like that's a departure from traditional how society would see itself. Okay. Anyway, interesting. Number 10's net zero carbon target is in disarray as Rishi Sunak, sorry, probably got that wrong, balks at the $1.4 trillion pound cost of making the UK a world leader in green politics. They're using the same platform to bankrupt the other countries. Canada is supposed to be a world leader in green policies, right? All it's done is increased our energy costs and made food, farming, and other necessary to live things like heating oil expensive and unattainable, right? So they're using this, they're selling people on this. They're saying if you're a good person, you won't question this. You won't question the money because we have to be a green leader, right? And you'll give up your entire way of life because you're a good person. That's what they want. That's what they want. They want you to sit down, shut up, and let them do whatever they want, and take all of your money for green initiatives that never pan out. Most subsidized energy in the last 15 years, green energy, and it doesn't work. Fundamentally, it doesn't work. Seamus O'Regan says, this is a ham-fisted attempt to drag an important conversation into political exaggeration and frankly non-truths. We need to talk about the value of workers and retooling to new opportunities in hydrogen, CCUS, and renewables, because it's what our customers are demanding. When did Seamus O'Regan have customers? I thought he represented people, right? The federal government's intention to hastily phase out Canada's world-class oil and gas industry is extremely harmful to the hundreds and thousands who work in the sector and will be detrimental to our economic recovery. That's Sonia Savage, and she is, talking about the transition from oil and gas, there is no comparison to oil and gas. Nothing compares to oil and gas. Nothing. There's nothing on the earth right now that could replace it. Nuclear maybe could run the grid, but there are inherent risks in nuclear and less risks with oil and gas, realistically. But they've made it so that you cannot question the necessity to reduce carbon. But as the meme says, the carbon that they want to reduce is you. So wake up to that. Karen says, today in Scotland, we have 478 in hospital with COVID and 60 in the ICU, 11 deaths, 23rd of July 2020, no vaccine, was 287 in hospital. So not quite half. 2 in ICU and 0 deaths. Tell me that the vaccine works. Think about this. This was under opening because I was going to have like Ontario open. So sorry if I've got these cases should have been earlier, but whatever. That's fine. Newfoundland has 2 cases. 85% have 1 dose, but the Newfoundland government has refused to even suggest when the state of emergency could be lifted. Like New Brunswick, the Premier and Health Minister must know the state of emergency must end now. Premier, and they've got the emails for people, and Dr. Fury and Dr. Hagee want restrictions of some kind until at least September. They want you to provide your vaccine status to enter the province and go through this dehumanizing checkpoint, even if fully vaxxed. With New Brunswick opening, they're out of excuses. Let them know. So people are done with this, and they don't want medical apartheid, but that's what we've got. International passengers arriving at Pearson International Airport will now be separated by vaccine status before heading through customs. I reported the other day that Vancouver Airport had these signs. Pearson's now got them too. And so you have to be separated, or there's segregation of vaccinated and unvaccinated. It's interesting though, because they were all on the same plane, right? And people were getting on the same plane. So it's theatrics, I think. It doesn't have anything to do with the reality of things. Here's Candace Malcolm, and she says, update, here's a map of 53 churches that have been vandalized or burned since the residential schools announcements. Yeah. Yep, that's awful. What an awful thing to keep track of. What a terrible thing to have happened. This is the last story for today, and it's interesting. I had heard stories of a guy who was hitting a horse in Australia, and the reality is this guy knows how to handle horses, and he's got his arm up, and he's like, you don't want your fingers bit by a horse, so you don't have an open hand when dealing with a horse generally, unless you're petting it on its eyes, like above its head, right? Like. Or you know the horse very well and you're feeding it or something like that. But generally, fingers could get eaten. So this guy's dealing with a horse in a way that I think makes perfect sense. Anyway, the media said that he was aggressive in hitting the horse. I don't know. I don't think so. The horse was going to back into him. And nobody punches a police horse. The police horse will turn around and bite you. Not really. Right? The police horse will just be kind of a police horse and carry on. But no, I don't think he was punching the police horse. So very interesting stuff happening in our world. We are orders of magnitude away from the problems that were inherent and obvious that we needed to deal with last year or before COVID. And the pathway back to even like addressing any of those issues is so convoluted and crazy. Like, we don't have a constitution. We don't have basic rights and freedoms. We don't have a way to hold our government accountable at all. Maybe we should deal with that before we try and put things back the way they were, right? Like, and yes, I want things to go back the way they were. I want like vacations and holidays. I want a non-draconian world. But this is the negotiation and people acquiescing to all of this. Just like after 9/11, it's a whole new world, and you don't go back to pre 9/11 because there's no reason to go back to pre 9/11. We learned that in 9/11 that buildings could get taken down by airplanes, and now all of a sudden the whole world has to suffer because of that. And now we learned that a virus can kill you at a rate of survival of 99.7%, and we have to lock down the entire world, and we can't go back from that. We can't unlearn that, right? So hopefully sanity reigns. I hope we can restore a sane approach to the world. But my hope is, let's see, I don't know if it's evaporating. I think that we came out of the Second World War, right? And it didn't go perfect, but nothing ever goes perfect. We came out of the Cold War, the Korean War. We came out of these things, these global conflicts. We came out and we built back better. No, we came out of it, and we created things that were worthy of the era and the society that we strive for, right? Like we built back, and we were able to exceed the previous high watermark, right? And I think that we can do that again. I think that I don't think that the sun has set on the west, and all that's left now is to pick the bones clean, right? Like, and I think that there are a lot of people like catastrophizing. And make no mistake, where we are is very, very scary. Like we are in a situation where, I mean, imagine the depths of hell during the middle of the Nazi occupation of Poland, right? Like that's a very scary situation. They came back from that, right? They came back from that and have a society that's worthy and better than, well, I don't know better. That's up to them, not me. But worthy anyway, worthy of a modern world. And so the darkness isn't going to last forever. People will stand up. People will demand their freedom. People will say that we know how to do this better than this. We don't have to follow this direction. We don't have to follow you idiots. It's just a matter of standing up. It's just a matter of everyone getting on the same page. So thanks for watching, everybody. Check out canadapoly.com. Check out canadaReport.co. Check out speakingmoistly.co. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.